You're listening to the Reboot Era, where we unpack what happens after the layoff and what rebuilding really looks like. Today's guest is Chris Nelson, a UX leader who's worked at Walmart, Wayfair, JCPenney, and Verizon. From layoffs disguised as relocations to recruiter ghostings and job hunting in the AI arms race, this one's a real and unfiltered look at what it takes to stay sane and human in today's market. Let's dive in.
My name's Chris, and just recently I was head of design for Walmart Fulfillment Services. I led a team of what grew it from 3 to 20 people, basically built our market share on WFS to something like $30 billion, which is, at that point is just like meaningless, when you're talking about money like that. Before then, I was at Wayfair, and before then, I was at JCPenney, and before then, I was at Verizon. So I've been kind of running the gamut, more recently at least, of kind of working in UX and design and operations for essentially retail from every angle, enterprise, customer, whatever you can think of.
And these aren't small companies, right? I mean, JCPenney is interesting because my mom she keeps them in business. She loves shopping at JCPenney's. But I don't remember the last time I've stepped foot in a store. Did you, as you're moving from Verizon to JCPenney to Wayfair and Walmart, are you leaving these opportunities because you have a new exciting opportunity, or were there shifts like you got laid off or let go or anything?
No, I just, opportunities come along, and, at Verizon, I had an opportunity to go into a fairly mature design org where we would have dedicated research, content, and designers, versus at Verizon, it was a little more old school, right? And so I really wanted to experience a more mature design org from a modern lens of user experience rather than the old school, well, you're a UX unicorn, you're doing all of the design and doing your design process, but no one cares about it. And then you're going in and essentially coding your own front end. And so that was kind of the old school web developer kind of approach, right? And so I really wanted to experience more than that. And so I moved over to JCPenney, and I was kind of a team lead essentially for Core Funnel, which is anything on the website, a native app, and did a bunch of cool stuff. And that was kind of also one of my first forays into service design, where we were able to do some innovative, cool stuff for like our flagship store and digital touch points. Like we were one of the first with, buy online, pickup in store, and curbside pickup along with Target, as well as cool digital scan and pay, digital wallet kind of stuff for the app. And so from there, that kind of gave me the gig in Wayfair. I read the tea leaves at JCPenney. The business wasn't doing as well. There was a big cohort of folks there that really was like, what is this newfangled website and app? We want people to have the phone book side, catalog delivered to people's doors, And so I think that kind of old guard was just hanging on by their fingernails, and they needed to kind of have their last hurrah. Of course, that bankrupted the company after I left, right? And so I had gone to Wayfair, where they were built from the ground up and from scratch, digital first, right? They didn't have any store locations, but they wanted my help to help kind of form what the physical store might be. And so I was a part of that design sprint and built the home services team over there. So it was less about kind of leaving the places where I was, which I loved Verizon. I loved JCPenney. It was more just about exciting opportunities that I didn't want to give up.
Yeah, that's awesome. And did these opportunities make you or ask you to move around the country or the world?
Yeah, so Wayfair actually relocated from the Dallas area because JCPenney's headquarters is in Plano, along with a lot of other headquarters like Frito-Lay and Toyota. And so I moved to Boston. And I always wanted to live on the East Coast. I had lived on the West Coast. I'd lived overseas, but I'd never lived in the Northeast. And so I really wanted to experience that. And so I did. I moved there in October 2019, and then everything shut down.
Well, I have to ask, as a fellow New Englander, grew up, born and raised in Vermont, and went to school in Rhode Island. Okay. How was your first nor'easter? Do you know what a nor'easter is?
Yes, of course. And so to me, if I had come from California, it would have been a bigger deal, right? And I did originally, right? But so any form of lightning, thunder, wind, rain was kind of novel growing up in the Bay Area. But having spent most of my adult life in Texas, where there's tornadoes and hurricanes and, anything, it was fine. I mean, it was a little weird snowing on a Halloween. Wasn't used to that. But you guys know how to deal with the cold. You guys know how to deal with infrastructure in ways that the rest of the country just doesn't, so it was actually fine.
Yeah, I take that for granted. We would, growing up, we'd have like a big blizzard. We'd have all this snow. We'd have feet of snow that's going overnight. And I'd wake up thinking, I'm looking out my window at 4 a.m. real quick, school's going to be canceled. And somehow within like an hour, hour and a half, they have cleared all of the roads. The bus is running. It will pick you up in, negative 10-degree weather. And you're just like, cool, we have school.
Yeah. And it was really kind of a new experience for me because I think like in Texas, we get down to sometimes the 20s, we had Ice Mageddon right after I actually moved back where all the power like turned off for basically the state for, like a week. But, going into Boston, it was like negative 15 or something, but I almost never had to turn my heat on because the insulation and the building construction was so good, versus in Texas, you're just like constantly having to run things because, the walls are made of cardboard.
Yeah. Okay. Well, before we hop into like some of the, I don't know, juicy questions that I have just around layoffs and your opinion right now in the current market, what is something for people who don't necessarily know UX design and they don't understand like what exactly maybe you do? Do you have any products or services you've worked on that you have your digital footprint on that you could share?
Sure. So if you shop at JCPenney or Wayfair or Walmart, basically the customer facing opportunities there. Like for Walmart, it's less simple because most of that is B2B, right? For either our partners and associates or for the actual businesses trying to sell their products on Walmart.com. So that's less visible. Now at Wayfair, if you look at the core funnel and you're shopping, I did a lot of work and my team did a lot of work on the product display pages. So if you have any kind of an attachment to a product like installation or protection plans, or if you want flooring installed or small room remodels or things like that, any kind of service is essentially what my team designed. And of course, the entire experience at JCPenney.
Right. That's awesome. So if you're playing on any of those apps and you're ordering things and going through, you now know one of the people who worked on some of that stuff.
Exactly.
So I'm looking at your LinkedIn and, maybe you can share a little bit about how you view LinkedIn and like your posting strategy. I see that previously it looked like you made a few posts, you shared things that you found interesting and what it looked like. But then as recently, you've been sharing more opinions about this market and things that are going on.
Yeah. So as I've become more of a leader and a manager at these positions, certainly over the last 10 years, I have gotten more and more protective of my designers and the folks that go to me, especially now with like the AI changes and like content strategists, and how they're trying to navigate these changes in a world where AI is writing everything, and there's so much slop, for better or worse. And, I've noticed that like if I'm having these issues, what can I do to kind of I know from back in the day, right? The idea behind LinkedIn was you even update like a sentence on your resume and it puts you to the top of the pile. All of a sudden you'd have 10 recruiters, emailing you. That doesn't work nowadays. You have to do a little bit more work, I think. And so I had a goal of posting once a week, but I didn't want to post about anything that I wasn't passionate about. Right. And so every week, at least I'd get, a little bit excited about something, for better or worse, positive or negative, and I'd try and post about it. And what I've noticed is this last post is by far, in a way, or I guess it was the post before last, because this last one was more like a goodbye to my position and thanking a bunch of people. And that's done well within my own networks. Right. But the one that really kind of, I think, got some attention was, my posts about ghosting. Right. And firing recruiters and having your own personal boundaries, or like saying, hey, I'm at this level. I have this much education. I have this much experience and I'm having all these problems. Anyone below me, or just starting out their career or that might not have the same like level of certifications or education or experience or Fortune 500 companies, like, you're probably having even a worse time, and you're not alone. Right. And so that's the message, which is like, if I'm having these problems, don't feel so badly about yourself,
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who can't see the post, I think there was two things that I really liked about it. The sentence, at this point, I'm starting to wonder if my LinkedIn profile has some kind of invisible do not call warning stamped across the top, because I think we can all feel that pain 100%. And then the last kind of little bit, about how this isn't a pity post, and it's a reality check and a message of solidarity. If you're showing up, applying, refining, trying, you're not alone. If you're questioning everything, you're not alone. And that's essentially what this podcast is all about as well. I want people to feel invited to come share their stories and talk about it, because it's not just you. It's not, you didn't get laid off. You didn't leave your job. You didn't want to not relocate just so that you wouldn't be hireable somewhere else. This economy and this job market is crazy. And there's thousands of applicants for job postings. And it's like, how do you battle and, utilize AI to put yourself as a front runner while also not getting, moved out of the pipeline for using AI, because the AI bots, looking at your profile, looking at your resume are like, hey, this doesn't meet the percentage we want. It's this really weird battle.
Yeah, totally. And it's a double-edged sword, because other people, you can guarantee, are going to be using AI in some way, whether it's just for validation or repositioning themselves or trying to do a career pivot or even outright fabrication. And so, when I go to some of these jobs that I think is a really good fit, and I see that it's posted 12 hours ago and there's already 500 applicants at the director level, it's just kind of, I don't know, soul crushing a little bit. And then knowing that, hey, I'm the perfect for this. I'm gonna, put my resume in and my cover letter, which I don't always do, and then a link to my portfolio. And then if the ATS AI, which of course is AI from like the 90s or something, doesn't get, a certain saturation of keywords for each individual position, which may or may not match up with its job description, then you're basically, fucked. And, you never know, because you don't get any kind of validation. And it's almost like, okay, maybe we should spend some time, if we're unemployed, to make 10 different versions of our resume, right? That are tailored to, maybe looking at our experience through a slightly different lens, and how it can go towards retail or telecom or XYZ, right? And you can have those ready to go, but I'm just not at that point yet where I'm going to look at every single job description and rewrite my resume for every application. And I don't know that anyone else should. I know that AI is being used to sift through, whether it's ATS or some other system is being used to sift through these 500 resumes that people are getting, or 1,000 resumes that people are getting. And I don't blame them. That's a lot. They need a really quick way to kind of cut out a swath so they have a usable pile of resumes that's more like 50 or 10 rather than 500 or 5,000. So I understand, but it's also really kind of, hard to think about when someone might be getting these opportunities that just might have better keywords than you rather than actual better experience, so, or might not want it as much. And so it's tough.
Yeah. And I think, I'm only 8 to 10 years into my career. And I moved across the country as well for Amazon back in 2019, at the end of 2019, right before COVID. It looks like you and I kind of swapped sides of the country. But, I thought Amazon was intense and hard to get into at first. And then I got there and I was like, oh, it's just like any other job. But, they pride themselves very differently. So when you're looking at this and you're going through, you're a UX leader, you have a lot of experience. What was the first thing that you kind of did to say, now I'm looking for a position? What are the first few things that you did?
Definitely LinkedIn is one of the first stops. Obviously you're looking at your resume, you're taking stock of your portfolio, case studies, at least in my case and in my industry, and of course yours as well. And what do I have now that I can utilize, and what kind of announcement do I want to make, and what kind of tone, and then you kind of pull the trigger. And so then you're kind of second guessing yourself. Okay, well, I'm not getting any hits, or I am getting pretty far in some of these interviews, and then I'm getting ghosted, and it's just like you start second guessing everything. Is it my interview performance? Is it my portfolio? You keep asking for feedback and just getting nothing. Or the worst is almost saying they liked you and they don't really have any feedback. They just have other candidates they like. And I'm like, yeah, but it's like, can you articulate that better? People would really be able to better themselves, and be able to learn from the amount of investment, and I just went through, I think, 8 rounds of an interview at a company, and they ended up telling me that I was overqualified. Right. And so it's like, what does that mean? Other than the obvious. And didn't we know that when I started the process? For another one, I had been talking to, this is a Fortune 50 retail company, and I'd been talking to them since December, since before the layoff even happened, and having conversations at the director and VP level. And this was an earlier post I made about ghosting, and the recruiters just kind of stopped talking even after many very positive interviews, and the VP of design there saying that I would be a great fit for one of these positions. And then the recruiters just ghost. And so I finally, after asking for 3 weeks if they would get back to me and tell me an update, I finally just came back and said, hey, take me out of the running. This is disrespectful. It's dehumanizing. You wouldn't do this to interns, let alone people that are talking and having discussions at the VP level, And so it's like, I just have boundaries, because when you don't respond to someone, whatever their level is, it just makes you feel like a tool, used. And no one should feel victimized by a process. I don't feel entitled to anything, but I'm sorry. But if I put in 8 to 10 hours of conversations and discussions, or even do a lot of prep work, it's like the least you can do is send me a boilerplate reply saying we've moved on or something, or where we are in the process. If you can't even be bothered to do that, I don't even know that I want to work for that company. It's like, I don't want to be in that culture.
Yeah.
If that's indicative of the culture there at all.
No, absolutely. And I think there's a few interesting things you called out there. The first is what you were just talking about, like you've invested time in this process and, they can't even invest the time back. It makes me always wonder internally, how are communications being sent out? Are you deciding last minute? Are you sending things out and all groups haven't aligned? The funny thing is I've turned to TikTok and I've made like satirical skits about these things where the recruiter essentially is just like, you're a perfect fit, and then ghosts you. You never hear back.
Of course.
We'll get back to you by Friday, but never tells you which Friday. It's like Friday in 50 years. Like, when were you planning on just letting me know the job is closed? And it's unfortunate. The other thing is that this market right now, for those who aren't dating in the world or haven't dated in a while, if you've never used apps to date, it is so similar to dating apps where you like meet somebody, you have a quick conversation, maybe you got coffee, you had that recruiter call, and then they're like, you're overqualified, which I think is equivalent to like, you're perfect, but let's just be friends. Like, I'm overqualified and I applied for the job. I want it. Like, okay, so could you level the position up? Like, is there opportunity somewhere else then? If you think I'm overqualified but a good fit and you took the time to interview me, you'd think that you'd find a place for me at your company.
Yeah, so they're basically saying you're too expensive, and then they're afraid that you'll leave at the first opportunity.
Well,
so I understand, I guess, but that's something that you could have told me if you were really worried about that. We had that discussion from the get-go. And so at least in the case that I experienced,
yeah.
but it's tough because it's just, if they don't even have the time of day to give you that boilerplate response of where they are in the process, it's like, hey, we're still interviewing 10 more people for this position and we're trying to just do our due diligence, or the hiring manager's on vacation, or anything, just give us anything.
Just sharing and
And that
giving
would
that
be,
transparency.
friendly and respectful and open, and I get it that you have 500 applicants or whatever, but, use a spreadsheet, you can keep track. If your whole job is about, managing essentially a pile of people to move through a hiring process, you've got to stay organized. And, this is not like dating where it's fairly anonymous. There's a picture, but you don't know. It's like, I know who you are on LinkedIn. Like, I very nearly called out this company and recruiters by name.
Mhm.
Just to say, okay, maybe what I've done here by firing this recruiter and this company, and I copied that VP on that email too, and maybe what I've done here will make them think twice before doing this to someone else. Of course, a week later, I found someone else was going through the same interview process at the same company, and they had been ghosted for 3 weeks. So I guess not.
They did think twice. They just decided that like they made the same choice. They were like, yeah, we
Yeah, they
thought about
thought
it
twice
again.
and said, nope, these
We're
people
doing it.
are, not
Exactly.
human and don't deserve basic, human respect.
So what about, with all your experience, have you ever ventured into or explored more of a startup culture or doing your own thing?
Yes. So I actually, back in the Great Recession, I actually kind of had my own design company that I had started up. And I had started up right before that kind of thing happened. I quit before my entire design team was laid off, and so they all got unemployment. I didn't. So I kind of had a fire under me, and so I managed to kind of keep afloat for 2 years there, the worst of that recession. And I didn't like it. I hated the process of getting the leads and kind of getting the jobs. I liked doing the work, and of course, getting paid. And so I wrote a book as well on SEO of all things back then. And it was making about, I want to say 1,000 to 2,000 a month, and then kind of trailed off within 6 months. Yeah, kind of almost like a flash in the pan. And then I worked at a startup later on and didn't like it. I think my first day I was hit in the head by a toy football by the CEO. And I was just like, this isn't my place. I like being able to book conference rooms and things like that. I like organization. I like just be able to kind of go in and have my spot and do my work and have clean lines and things like that. And so I'm more of a corporate guy. And I know that's weird. I'm not like an agency guy or a boutique guy or a startup guy. I'm almost all my experience is in corporate America, Fortune 500. So I'm a little weird, maybe too nerdy in that sense. But more recently, I am getting back into my own thing, and I'm trying to kind of do a lean startup kind of situation just as a hobby. And I'm going to be trying my hand at having my own kind of aggregate AI service.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to share, feel free. Otherwise, we should chat more in the future.
Yeah, I just feel like there's a space for, aggregation and trust, especially with these LLMs, these large language models like ChatGPT and Gemini. And there's just everyone's just trying to say like which one's the best, and it's just so sequential, right? This month, Gemini might be the best, and then Grok comes out with an update, and then Claude, and then ChatGPT again, right? And so it's just like, it's such an arms race, it's such a gold rush right now. And so what if we had a system that could aggregate these LLMs into one UI, one user experience, and then kind of compare and contrast what the consensus is between them, and then link off to what we could compare as what the truth might be from actual sources like LexisNexis for law and things like that, right? And so it's to try and kind of get the guesswork out of like which LLM is the best this minute, and how much can I trust that this is not an AI hallucination, right? And so I'm trying to solve multiple problems with kind of one product, and so I'm really excited to move forward with that.
That's awesome. Good luck. I hope that is super successful. Do you think that people, in your experience, do people care on the accuracy of AI? Do they care on having the best of the best? Or do they care on having something that works? Like ChatGPT being nonprofit and not trying to heavily monetize versus Gemini, which might, it's a Google product, and it might start having a lot more fees for all the different features they're adding.
Sure. Yeah. I think that there's value in accuracy for sure. I think that at its base, LLMs are programmed essentially just to try and guess the next correct word, not the next correct sentence or paragraph, literally just the next word. Everything else is kind of window dressing and bells and whistles on top of that these companies keep adding. Now, this is a gross oversimplification, but that's essentially what it is, right? And so they're not super interested at this point in history with accuracy and getting rid of hallucination. They're just trying to get higher and higher and higher fidelity. So, and just kind of hoping that, correctness and accuracy and hallucination go down, right? And so I feel like there is a level of truth that you can be attained through consensus between all the big LLMs. And on top of that, maybe a layer for, trying to parse what the actual truth might be, right? And so you get into a dangerous place with that. Right. But we've already been in a dangerous place because a lot of people are taking, a lot of the things that these people or these LLMs say as gospel, and it might lead people down very dangerous or very wrong paths. All it has to do, just like, as Elon Musk said about self-driving, it can do the absolute worst wrong thing at the absolute worst wrong time, and it can have devastating consequences, right? And so I think people in the sciences, I think people in healthcare, and I think people in education are very interested in something that can be as accurate as possible.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. And I try to help people who haven't explored what these AI agents can do for you to understand it like a conversation. You don't take everything at face value. You have to add additional questions for clarification. You have to provide more input, and it's your model, right? As I chat with ChatGPT, it may not give the exact same response that my mom will utilize. She has a different understanding of preferences for prompts and responses that she gets versus myself. So I do think it's such an interesting space.
Oh yeah, and we're just kind of in the early days still because we're seeing now new titles like AI ethicists and prompt engineers, and we're getting quotes from these CEOs. And the latest one from Anthropic is that essentially if your job is sitting at a computer all day, that job is going to be gone within the next 5 to 10 years, right? No
Yeah,
matter
I
no
think
matter who or what you are.
I think it's so interesting, and I definitely have been talking to people in the space about AI and the things that they know, and hopefully having some episodes on this podcast about it. But it's nice in theory, I feel like, to like automate yourself or AI yourself out of a job, but it's still not 100% done in practice. And I can't wait for that day. I want to see those results because people keep saying it with my layoff. That's the words we were given was like because of AI. And I was like, did I misunderstand something? Like, what were we doing? That was like, you don't need me anymore. It's completely because the prompts weren't written. People didn't know what to input. Yes, it saved time for sure. So if you wanted to like decrease some of the workforce, that made sense. But like the job, they're not doing what my job is yet. So
No, no,
we're
absolutely not.
not
And
there
and
100%.
it's really about, operating and adding AI to your flow, right? But I do have to say it depends on what you do, right? Because I feel like a lot of people like design is not there yet, right? There's a lot of like art to that, but there's enough heuristics out there that, and other UIs, the whole internet is made of UIs that eventually they're going to get there, right? But right now, the main fields within UX that are suffering, I would say, is by far and away content strategy. Technical writers who it's basically just gone, and depending on who and what you're doing, and then research. Right. I would say research, a lot of it's getting truncated. Now people are feeding personas into like ChatGPT and saying, hey, I'm going to interview you. Please role play as this persona that I fed you, and they're replacing actual qualitative research with these AI agents that are essentially pretending to be personas. It's actually pretty impressive if you want to try it, but it's never going to replicate an actual human. Right. But companies are going to say, well, it's the next best thing rather than pay, a vendor, or an employee $200,000 to get this stuff done. We can just plug this into ChatGPT and be 60% of the way there. You know, that's the big question that's happening across a lot of fields, and that's also happening in engineering. So right now it's affecting entry level jobs. But it's like a wildfire, and it's just not going to get any better.
Yeah, no, I know. And I try to tell people to kind of stay ahead of the curve and get out there and learn how to essentially prompt, learn how to use it
What
because
is the
that'll
one-to-one
help.
of your current job and what you're passionate about and what you're interested in to something in the AI field, right? What is going to future-proof your job and what you do in interesting and unique ways? And so it's really important right now to stay on top of it because it's just like, musical chairs. We're all just playing musical chairs right now with AI. And if you don't prepare the right way, the music's going to stop and you're not going to have a job to sit down at. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. I do find it interesting. I will say, like, even if it works, even in 5 to 10 years from now, they're like AI everything. I mean, like, I enjoy human. I mean, I don't really enjoy humans when I don't want to enjoy humans, right? Like, I'm at home, I have 2 dogs, that's it. I don't want to talk to people. But when I call to have an issue, I don't want to do it with Deborah AI. I don't want to fight with her and say, I just want to speak to the effing representative. Just
Yeah.
transfer me. I get so frustrated.
Yeah.
So those things I hate. I don't order out and go like out to eat a lot, but I've seen a lot of people who are like, they're using tablets now instead of waiters. And I'm like, I have food allergies. Sometimes I want to talk to someone and make sure it's very clear. Like, let me meet the person in the kitchen. And then the person in the kitchen's a robot. I'm like, okay,
What?
great, cool. So, we've digressed. We've gotten into AI, which is lovely. I love the conversations, but I don't want to keep taking too much of your time. So let's kind of pivot back to the conclusion, which is since you've have this great experience and you're typically someone who gets their door knocked on, and now you're kind of going around knocking on doors to find a job, what are your biggest takeaways that you would want to share that are working for people to find jobs, to land the interviews, anything like that?
Right. So I can only speak from my own experience, right? I've just hired a bunch of replacements back at my last position, which was kind of awkward to do. But like some of those folks had been in the market for 6 months to a year. And one of them, in fact, was a manager who kind of busted himself to lead designer and then took a job as a senior designer and then moved across country just to get that job. And so that's real tough and hard to hear. And so for me, looking back at my career, even in the good times, I've almost never gotten a job in my field from applying, from just cold applying. Right? It's like you have to know someone. You have to have a recruiter, come to you. You have to either know someone that's already been there or have a referral. And so the networking has never been more important. And I think most of your time should be spent making yourself, as an attractive candidate to pursue as possible. Work on your own experience and portfolio and continuously bettering yourself, whether that be technically and officially through like certifications or just, doing your own projects and adding them as case studies that you can pull from, in these conversations. Start networking more, get out there. I've gotten several referrals for other positions and hiring managers reach out to me because of those posts on LinkedIn, right? Because they were reposted, 15, 20 times by different people outside of my network that I wouldn't have reached. So it's much more about networking and bettering yourself and just making yourself, for all those recruiter fishermen and hiring fishermen out there, making yourself as big and I don't know, pretty as a fish as possible. Be an attractive fish is my takeaway.
I love it. I think that's great advice, just networking. And with that, you have 33, just over 3,300 followers. You have great experience. Are you open to people connecting with you if they hear your name on LinkedIn to ask questions or, see who's in your network and give referrals?
Yeah. My pet peeve is people reaching out to me and then like making it seem like it's a legitimate, like job opportunity or like they're interested. And then they pivot to be like, oh, I'm a resume service or I'm a networking service or I'm an agent or something like that. And that's just like the most betrayal. Or even the worst is the ghosting, right? Where you reach out to someone and you want a connection or you really want to pick their brain about something, not feeling entitled, but just not getting anything. And so I really make it a point. If someone reaches out to me and they seem legitimate, I will always reply. So yes, please.
Awesome. Yeah, and I can attest to that. I have no idea who Chris was before this. I saw a post on LinkedIn. I decided to message him and ask him to be on this podcast. And he was like, yeah, I don't need to do any prep. Let's do it. Let's have a conversation. So connect with Chris if you have any questions about, the UX space, what he's done, any connections he might have, and how to network, because it sounds like he has some great experience and can help out there. That's it for today's episode on the Reboot era. Huge thanks to Chris for showing up with honesty, humor, and serious insight. If you resonated with this convo, send it to a friend who's in the trenches too. And if you want more unfiltered career talk, follow the show and connect with us on socials. Until next time, keep rebooting.